Welcome back to another episode of the Bourbon Lens with your host, Jake. Scott is on dad duty tonight, so it is just me, and I'm excited because we are going to be talking luxury American single malt and rye whiskey tonight with Julie Macklowe of the Macklow Whiskey. So sit back and buckle into the latest episode of the Bourbon Lens. Julie, thank you for spending a little bit of your time in Colorado with us while
Yeah.
you're traveling to talk a little bit about your whiskey, your brand, and
Thank you.
everything that you have created. I'm excited because obviously, and you're well aware of all the things that are happening with American single malt is a big time, and you are the luxury brand of American single malt. So
I
we'll
know
talk
it's sort of
about that
crazy.
for
We're
sure.
the only luxury brand. But yeah, it's exciting time. So I started this journey. So I just to give you some background. I
Yeah.
basically started this because I'm a huge lover, connoisseur of all single malt. It was almost in 2018 that I was like hanging out in Isle of Scotland. I was like, oh, I'm drinking some whiskey with Dr. Bill Lumsden and his protege at the time, Brendan McCarran. I was like, this is so crazy. I've been collecting my whole life. I have scotches from 1936 to present day, Irish, Canadian, Japanese, Taiwanese. But I realized in my collection there was no high-end American-made product. I was like, hey guys, I have this crazy idea. Like, why don't we go make an American single malt that's like the Ferrari of American single malts? And they're like, we have no idea what you're talking about. There's no such thing as American single malt, but like, sure, we'll help you make it. So I partnered with Brendan McCarran and at the time Ian McMillan out of Glenguy, Deanston, Bunnahabhain, Bladnoch. And I was like, I want to do like the highest quality American single malt. So we started laying down our liquid, which is what's in our signature gold bottle in 2019 in Kentucky in Danville. And well, that tour was laying down. We came at, you remember it was COVID and everything went to hell in a handbag. And we came across about 20 exceptional barrels. And these were actually sourced from Bull Run in Oregon. And at year 7, this is 12-year-old liquid, we brought down from Oregon to Kentucky. And so these casks, there's only like 9 remaining, never can replicate that liquid ever again. But I'd say those were like our initial $1,500 bottle that like gave us probably the halo effect. We actually don't even make money on these. I mean, the casts themselves, because there's so few of them, they cost so much. And then, each bottle may make 200 bottles if we're lucky. But this came
Hmm.
out of basically Oregon. I'd say it's a heavier liquid as, marzipan in it. It's got a lot of plum, dried fruits. It's got Seville marmalade in there. It's got much more oil and dark chocolate. Um, I'd say on the palate, lots of fruit cake, licorice. And then when you really taste it, it's got this extremely complex finish to it. It's very layered, very complicated. And that was what sort of put us on the map as like the first luxury American single malt. And this wasn't even liquid that we made, but they're very special casks that we can never get back. Now, through the journey, obviously that bought us a little time. We launched this in like December 2022. So now we're still like, I've already done the packaging and the design. And part of the reason the bottles are designed like this is when I looked at all of the bottles out there, I was like, oh my God, they were all designed by like dead white guys. Like, let's do something more modern. I want like this idea of like Tom Ford meets jewelry, meets whiskey. And when you see it in the small format, I have 200 mLs that we do for hotels, it looks just like a flask. And it's because
Mm.
I always have my alcohol with me. I always want to have my good whiskey. So,
Yeah.
finally, then we launched this about a year and a half ago, which is our main edition. This is only 10 casks together. So it's still like super small. And what's crazy is if you look at these in the glass, and I'm just going to do side by side, is that the 12-year-old liquid in our Kentucky 5-year-old liquid is almost the exact same color, which is
Hmm.
sort of nutty, right? And
Yeah.
part of that's because Kentucky, the liquid age is much quicker and it goes from 100 to 20 degrees, as you know. So they say like a 20-year-old scotch is like a 6-year-old Kentucky malt. And this
Yeah.
is 100% malted barley. We use all ISC cooperage, 18-month air dried. We blend char 1 and char 3 cooperage together, which are also heavy and medium toast. That's our special recipe. And basically when you smell this, you'll see it's very different than the, I'd say the 12-year-old liquid. To me, it's a much more drinkable whiskey. It's an everyday whiskey. There's honey, vanilla. If you're a bourbon drinker, it's got the nose of a bourbon because you'll see this new American oak, right? It's
Yeah.
got a lot of spiciness because it's 100% malted barley. I think you get some pineapples and some apricots come in there, some spicy orange and ginger for sure. And I think you also get a little clove oil. And then when you're like mid palate, if you add a little water to it, you get some more floral and tropical notes come through, some cake almost and citrus. And then what I love is when you drink it, it really almost punches out like a scotch. And you're like, wait, start like a bourbon, it ends like a scotch. I say it's like a bourbon, a scotch had a baby, and then it's very smooth on that finish. And I think
Mm.
that was like what really differentiates our product is how elevated and how smooth it is on the finish. Now, what I realized because I started selling this 2 years ago, and by the way, American Single Malt just got approved on my birthday, basically 4 months ago. Yay me. But I
Yeah.
realized no one knew what it was. So we also had laid down a bourbon, which we have not released, in a rye. In our rye, we intentionally did at the exact same proof, 46%. It's a 95.5 rye because I really want people to understand that it's just a grain change when you go from rye to, malted barley, although it's a very different taste profile. Now, I'm sure you've tried lots of rye and you've got it there. So you'll see what's different about ours is we took up to 4 years and then we finished our malted barley casks, which I'm pretty sure I'm the first person to ever do that. I thought of it in the shower. I called Brendan McCarran. I was like, hey, I have this crazy idea. I want to take our rye and then I want to finish our malted barley cask. He's like, well, since that very few people even made single malt, he's like, that's a great idea. Let's try it. So, I think when you start on the aroma, you'll see it's the classic honey. It's still new American oak. It's got some white sugar. I think it's got actually a white peppercorn, definitely caramel. Some green peppercorns come through. The taste, like most ryes, it's spicy. It's got that menthol. It's a round finish. It's definitely got some vanilla in there and the honey notes. It coats your mouth like a golden syrup. I get figs. I think most ryes, you get like that jalapeno bite and they die. And what we found is like you actually then get the fruits from the malted barley. So like the pineapple and the apricots start to come through on that finish as you get sort of a leather flavor that also comes through and a longer finish for a rye that I think you're used to because of that malted barley. It's, I'd say, super unique in the flavor profile. I mean, you drink tons of rye, so you tell me your impression of it. But I think that would be overall sort of what we get commentary wise when people try it.
Yeah, for sure. I'm sipping on the American single malt first
Yeah,
and foremost, right? Because I feel like that's what you all are known for. Um,
absolutely.
and you said apricot or pineapple. I got like a flame tangerine. I'm in the same
Yeah,
ballpark.
there's
Sometimes,
definitely honey orange. Yeah,
yeah,
ginger. Yeah, flame tangerine. I love that. I might
yeah.
steal that.
And I do like that ginger note. I was looking for that, like that ginger gives you kind of that like tickle on your tongue when you eat it.
Yeah.
And so that ginger note's there. And then I like the contrast of like on the palate, it's got the honeys and the vanillas, but then it has this bitterness to it because of that
Yes.
almost orange peel, tangerine peel type deal going on, which I like. I like a little bit of bitterness in my single malt. I think it,
Yeah.
it shows the true validity of the grain and the barrel interacting with one another, especially in
Absolutely.
100% malt. And I think the finish does give you a lot of that. It almost, the vanilla changes to chocolate, like it's like multi chocolate on the
Yes.
back end. Um,
Yeah.
and the citrusy notes kind of fade, but it's that multi
On the
chocolate
end, for
big.
sure.
It
Yeah.
becomes a more complex finish, which is interesting. So that leads me to my question. In Danville, there's a couple people that you could partner with to,
Yeah.
to make whiskey with. Is this column or pot still?
So it goes double distillation through a pot, then into a pot. I'm sorry, column, then into a pot. We
Okay.
make it. So I went to Dr. Pat Heist and Shane Baker, the
Yeah.
only guy who's used yeast, and they'd never done American single malt. To this day, I believe they only have made mine. in my
Yeah.
contract that was true. So, they were really excited about this project. They'd never done, as you know, it's much more complicated to make American single malt. The yields are way lower, barley costs a lot more, hence the pricing's just more expensive. But why we
Hmm.
chose them is because we did a custom yeast, which gives it so much of the flavor, and we do locally sourced barley. And I think the craftsmanship of their know-how is what really got me excited about working with them. And Brendan knew them, and that's sort of how this all came to fruition. And that
Yeah.
was, probably like 10 years ago. So 2018, not quite 10, but almost. Feels like decade almost.
Time flies when you're having
And
fun, right?
what's crazy is that, the category just got approved. So everyone's like, oh, this is brand new. I'm like, well, not really. I've been doing it forever. But like,
Yeah.
it is sort of brand new, right? Like it feels like brand new, but it's like when you start making it so long ago, it feels like, wow, there's not more players, but there are now. I think there were 20 people doing this when we started. Now there's, I think, over 100. So it's definitely getting more
Yeah.
noticed. The category's still so new though.
For sure.
So
And I always hear the debate like, does it make sense for the big guys to play in it, and like does it bring notoriety to the overall category? I think it does when a Jack Daniels or a
yeah,
Jim Beam,
bullet.
take notice and build out, a portfolio that people can like, oh, hey, this is what it looks like at scale. Now I need to go find what of my niche that I like
Yeah,
in this. I think rising tides raise all ships, right? I
totally. And
think
I
that is
think
very
just
true for
like
American single
having
malt.
those big guys in so important because they have the training, the education, they have the people in the bars doing, awareness, teaching the difference between bourbon and American single malt and rye. And I think part of the reason we did the same proof is just so people could understand it. And
Yeah.
that is a big thing. Like people are like, what is American single malt? I'm like, well, if you like bourbon, it's like bourbon with 100% malted barley. I'm like, or if you drink scotch, it's like scotch made in Kentucky. Those are
Hmm.
like my really simplified answers, right?
Yeah, for sure. And just to hit a little bit on your backstory before I move into the rye whiskey, I always am interested, right? So you said you've been collecting for a long time, and
Yeah.
you have a job that previously where hedge fund managing, where you probably
Yeah.
need a dram or 10
Oh yeah,
occasionally.
it was how I assimilated into the hedge fund business. I ran my first Steve Cohen and the Englander, the guys who owned the Mets, and the way I assimilated into that lifestyle is like I drink whiskey with the boys and smoke a cigar, and that was like how I started drinking whiskey. I was living in Asia, and I'd literally like they'd work me 24/7, and I'd spend all my dinner allowance at the gift shop, and like literally like hoard little bottles into my studio apartment. Fast forward, I moved to New York City, took my bottles, met my husband, discovered Amex and whiskey auctions, and boom. It was like, wow, now I have like thousands of bottles. What do
Yeah.
I do with these? I was putting them away. And that's really when I realized, oh my God, there's no high-end product. Like we
Yeah.
got to change that.
No,
So
that's a cool story. And, do you remember that like sip that kind of like we're like, okay, whiskey's a thing and I'm gonna do it to hang out and be a part of the
yeah.
crowd. But like, what was that sip that was like, man, this is actually something I really enjoy as an individual?
Yeah. So I mean, I remember my first bottle I drank because I lived in Asia was definitely Macallan. It was like
Hmm.
a Macallan 18. But
Yeah.
I'm not a huge connoisseur of cherry casks. They're not my personal favorite, a little too sweet for me. So I
Hmm.
remember it was an Oban. And I was like, oh, this is a little bit more fruity, a little lighter. I'm actually a whiskey ambassador with like 200, a couple thousand registered ambassadors. I can pretty much blind taste everything because I do this for a living, and I sit there and I do blend our samples before we send them to Brendan, and then he and I talk about them. But you know, I think I also like love a peaty whiskey, right? So like I do remember like my first Lefroy, and like
Mm.
I remember I bought at Maison du Whiskey. I was fortunate, I was in finance making enough money. I remember buying like tropical Ardbeg 1960s and drinking the whole bottle. I'm like, and they weren't even peaty then. Those
Yeah.
Ardbegs from the 60s are not peaty. I was like, wow, this is amazing. So like I've been fortunate that because traveled, I was in finance, I got a lot of exposure to a lot of amazing whiskeys and
Hmm.
like had access to, I'd say, super high end whiskeys that most people never even get drink.
Oh, for sure. And I think that's the beautiful thing about, traveling. You do get that opportunity to run
Yeah,
into that rare something or that random cask finish.
totally.
And I
Well,
wasn't a
the
huge,
truffle oak, I don't know if you remember the truffle oak that
I have
Dr.
not
Bill
heard of
did.
that.
Glenmorangie truffle oak finish. One of my favorites too.
That-
I mean, I think that's what's interesting about making whiskey and actually being a connoisseur is that there's so many different variations and so many unique flavor profiles. Why we stuck with new American oak versus using, used oak was we want to do it the American way. And to me, that comes from bourbon heritage, which means it's new American oak. Obviously, they just approved the law. You can do either new or used, but we really decide that we want to have like an Americana brand, which meant to keep it down to what we saw as the essence of American roots.
yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think, there'll be a time where American single malt does pick up the secondary cask finish, kind of the portfolio. I think we're
So
near
we're
that.
finishing some in port right now. They're pretty
Exactly.
great.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think that's what's really fun and all the like the weird random cask. Like the one that kind of like got me over the hump is Old Pulteney did a
Oh,
Pinot de Charente cask
yep. I
for their
remember.
Coastal series. And that was just
I love Old Pony.
everything that I wanted in a whiskey, right? Like it doesn't matter if they're
Yep.
American or world. Like um and that kind of turned me on to be like, oh, you know what? Maybe that Dalmore is kind
Yeah.
of good. Maybe, maybe I need to do this and this and this. And so I appreciate World Whiskey. And then Scott's, who's not on tonight, he kind of got us as, there was a time we joked internally as a podcast group, we need to change our moniker to the single malt lens because we were drinking so much American single malt during the pandemic. It just like all the West Coast players were trying to come
Yeah.
East Coast and find the new, people. And, we've sat down with probably all the 20 original ones. We've probably sat down with all of them.
That's
Now
nice.
you,
One of my
um,
favorite pandemic stories, you'll appreciate this. So I bought off an arms dealer a Springbank 1966.
oof,
I also got my favorite ball that I've ever drank, another Springbank Signatory Reserve 1969. And then I
mm,
got the entire Glenlivet cellar collection.
whew,
Yeah. Which was,
yeah,
I had certain bottles of it. I think the, 73 truffle, sorry, the 73 French oak, and then there's like the 69 were probably two of my favorite bottles, but I got the entire set
yeah.
in COVID, which was extraordinary.
Yeah, COVID allowed for a lot of things to exchange
Yeah.
hands.
Yeah.
Because people were sitting at home and like, I need a little extra money.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let me sell.
Yeah. I had some, oh, and I got the Bowmore Globus 1973, which 50 were made and they recalled, I think, every bottle except for two of them because it wasn't filled correctly. So
Yeah,
COVID was a fun time to be a collector for sure. Yeah,
for
people
sure.
are looking for spare cash.
Exactly.
Liquid gold, literally.
Literally. And that's, become a thing. And, I would be remiss if I didn't ask a finance person about all the stuff going on in and around whiskey, right? Like you're going to have a very unique position as a business owner in the liquid perspective, but also from a futures and just kind of seeing the industry as a trend. A lot of people say it's the whiskey glut and, the bourbon boom or whiskey boom is over. My take personally is
Mm,
we're just going to go back to traditional growth markets. You're going to see some people kind of come back to the median a lot of the time.
yeah.
You're going to see 1 to
So
2%.
I think that's actually a great. I was just having this conversation yesterday with somebody. I do think there's an overproduction in bourbon.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone
100%.
can agree on that. Um, American single malt's so new that I can tell you for a fact there's no overproduction because if I want to go buy it in the secondary market, it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So that's a new market. I think alcohol consumption overall is down because of Ozempic and GLP-1s, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Younger people are not drinking. Obviously, our target market, given our pricing, is somebody probably 30 to 65 and
Yeah.
older. I don't know that we're specifically targeting people in their 20s and who are not drinking and, moving more to alternatives like drugs. Um, I think we're also saw a huge spike in COVID
Yep.
from people just sitting at home. And to your point, I think it's just normalizing. I don't
Yeah.
think we're going into this huge down cycle. I think it's just we're seeing the new normal now.
Yeah.
And people are drinking two drinks and they're trading up to a premium drink. And when you're selling a $40 shot, you were never throwing them back. So
Yeah.
like I think like the reality is our positioning was always about connoisseuring and drinking and enjoying and not over consuming, but having the finest quality and really drinking what you like in higher quality. And I think that is the trend of what we're seeing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think,
You don't need 10 Louis Vuitton handbags, you need two good ones, right? So,
yeah.
you know, I think that is still people still are gonna go out and drink. Um, you know, is everyone gonna sit there and do drugs instead? I don't believe that. It's just not where I see things. So
No, I mean, I agree. I mean, I know at like the last big meeting of something, cannabis cocktails became a big thing, right? I don't know if that is all the rage or not. I mean, people my age, I'm kind of right in your demographic. I'm 35,
yeah.
right? I'm on the early end of that. Um, where I would rather sometimes trade in quantity for quality, right? So my ideal price point for a beverage most of the time, like at my home, if I'm going to purchase, is somewhere between 50 and $100. There's a lot of times I'll spend a little bit more. There's sometimes I'll spend less because I know that,
Yeah.
Heaven Hill produces great quality whiskey. Doesn't matter if it's 20 bucks or if it's, 5,000. Um,
Yeah.
so I'm right there with you. I think people are trading up. They're trying to find the right thing, and I think they may not go out to bars. I think that's the other thing that
Yeah.
people are understanding is beverage alcohol consumption is down at the
Well, they're
restaurant
not
or
going
the
out because
bar.
it's so expensive. And just to
Exactly.
go to a meal for two people now is like $250. And like how many times are you gonna do that a week? Like, so you're staying
Not
home a little
often.
bit. I'm just saying it's like the restaurant pricing has become extraordinarily high. So I think that is also some of what's going on here. And you can't underestimate the fact that like, oh, I'm gonna sit home, I'm gonna drink my own bottle and drink my own whiskey. And look, part of the reason we came out with our $100 bottle here, which you can get on the Macklowe.com, is that we want to have a more affordable option. Now, is
Yeah.
this your well liquor at $30? No. It's still a connoisseur's liquid. We're still only batching 10 casks together. It's still like all hand selected. So, our goal was never to be a mass brand, right? That's
Yeah,
not my personal goal. We want
for
to be
sure.
like Louis Vuitton or Dom Perignon, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and speaking of, you picked up the silver bottle and I've been drinking this. I agree with you. The caramel red fruit vanilla fig is the kind of the note I get on the nose,
Yeah.
but um the multi-barrel thing is giving me some peated vibes, that little bit of
Yeah.
smoke, a little bit
A little
of
smoke.
it's almost like pit smoke. I would say more barbecue-y than it is
Yeah,
like
it's not
not
like
peat.
a peated whiskey smoke though. I
Mm-mm.
think
No.
I'm careful when I use that because when I hear smoke, I think of Lafroig or Lagavulin.
Yeah.
I think it's almost like a spiciness that comes
Yeah.
through,
It does.
right?
And then it's balanced with that tropical. So like I
Yeah,
think of like carnitas, right? Where um it's that pineapple smoke
yeah,
kind of deal thing that you have going on. And so I think that makes it really uniquely American, right?
yes,
And I think that's a really interesting kind of, I don't know, it's just playing on my tongue. And I'm just like, I don't know what to
yeah.
do with it because it's unique and different.
It's different. It's super
Um
different. And look, that was sort of my view is like, look, Beyonce came out with her 51% rye, 49% malted barley. I think ours is better because we actually took the rye and then finished it in malted barley.
yeah,
But the whole idea was to have something that was not on the market.
yeah. Well, I could say a lot of things about the first thing. I'm going to leave it at
Yeah,
that.
I think
There's
ours
a
is
reason
better.
why there's
You
a
know,
full bottle behind me on the left
I know. I hear
over.
you. I tried it side
Um,
by side.
but yeah,
We won't comment.
I think this is unique. I think the Scotch drinker trying to get into American whiskey as a whole, maybe you don't want single malt because it may be too harsh because the new barrel. This would be another entry point for them. I do
Yes,
love an Isla cask finished whiskey. I think
I
Barrel
do too.
Bourbon did that really well. This gives me that vibes, and I think you could really, you could sit down across from an Englishman or
Yep.
Scotsman and say, "Here, try this," and they'd be like, they would get tripped up a little bit on what it actually is.
Yeah. It's
Um,
funny. A lot of people are like, is that Space Side? Like if I didn't tell them, they wouldn't know.
yeah, it does.
Yeah.
It does have Scotchy vibes to it, which
Yeah. It is Scotchy vibes. And that was like the idea is like, and also like it's a reason that our products around the 5 to 6 year mark, and we'll have single releases that come out older, but we don't want to get too woody. We want to
hmm
be drinkable and approachable too.
yeah, no, and it's so weird how vanilla forward it is on the
Yes.
nose and palate, and
Well,
how
that's because we use char one.
yeah, and then it fades to that chocolate, like that
Yep.
malty chocolate. I feel like I'm sitting at an ice cream shop and I got a chocolate malt, right? And I didn't get a chocolate
Yep.
milkshake, I got a chocolate malt. Um, and that's a very specific thing. Kids these days probably don't know because they've never
No,
got a malt.
no,
Um,
I don't even know what that is.
and like that mix with that oak bitterness, like it just works. It works
Yeah.
really well.
No, I
Um,
think look, I feel blessed that people love the product. I'm so glad you do. We're in all the top restaurants, John George, Danielle. I'm here in Aspen at tons of restaurants, Catch. So we're like doing great. We're in fun places like Princess Cruises, and what's fun about this is the journey and meeting all these awesome people. Total Wine carries our product now. I believe Reserve Bar has it. So it's been a fun journey for sure of
yeah.
like meeting interesting people, some of the best bartenders in the world, some awesome mixologists. It's been like fun to do.
Yeah, for sure. And, I know you showed the bottle earlier and I'm going to show it again as well. But I actually had this sitting next to my wife's perfume bottle
Oh,
upstairs. And, you know, it could pass as a giant ass bottle of
good.
perfume. um,
Yes, but
it
when
is
you see it
beautiful.
in the small format, you really do like you're like, wow, that could be
Yeah.
like a portrait. Yeah.
And, big fan of screw tops, right? Like, say what
No,
you want.
off the Japanese whiskeys. Everyone's
Screw
like,
tops
why
are
don't you have a cork? I'm like, because it lasts much longer if you put a screw top on it.
yeah, and it ain't gonna have cork taint. Like I can literally
No,
put this and
you don't get bad bottles with screws.
hey,
I was so
that
upset. I had a Bowmore 1988 hand fill bottle. I remember opening it, the whole bottle was skunked. I was like, "Ah,"
yeah,
so annoyed. So that
yeah,
doesn't happen with screw tops.
for sure. I went and picked up my aunt-in-law. I don't know my wife's aunt's. She had a very old Fitzgerald. Come to find out, I looked at the laser code or not laser code. I looked at the back of the bottle.
Yeah.
It was Stitzel, um, old Fitzgerald, and the cork had evaporated into the bottle.
It's the
And I was
worst.
just like, can I salvage this? And so
I know.
I'm
And then you
sitting there with a
strain it. Trust me,
strainer.
I've done the same thing. The strainer, the decanter, like trust me, I've done it all.
Yeah.
I
And it
understand.
didn't save it.
No,
It
never
was
saves
sad.
it.
They were like,
You
you,
try,
you
but
said I
never
could sell
works.
this for X amount. Yeah. If the cork didn't, like, you have to, like, every now and again, like with a cork, you have to shake the bottle. You have to keep the
No,
thing wet. People don't tell you like whiskey 101 when it comes to
no, they
making
don't.
sure that, your bottles don't mess up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And then you have to put the argon spray in it to make sure to preserve it. It's a whole
Mm,
thing.
It is.
And
It
that
is.
changes the taste sometimes. Yeah.
So, for you, like what's next, right? So you talked a little bit about you laid down some bourbon. You
Yeah,
obviously
so
you
we're
got the
launching a blue bottle, which you'll love. It's like royal blue. They'll come out sort of late this year, early next year. I don't know until I know. And then we have a red bottle that I'm working on a secret recipe for. So, the idea is to have a full line, but really
yeah.
focused on three of our SKUs will be American single malt. And then I do think you need to have the bourbon and rye just to really round out the line so people can understand.
hmm No, I think it'll be fun to see you all expand and grow as your stuff comes of age, right?
Yeah,
And
our bourbon's about 6 years, so that's probably the point where we'll start to release.
that's the Steve Nally rule: 6 years
Yeah,
or older. I mean,
yeah. I
he
didn't
laid
feel
down a few
comfortable doing it before then.
he laid down a few bottles, at
Yeah,
Maker's Mark over time.
yeah.
Um,
So I think that's the right rule, though.
Yeah, I would agree.
It's a
I
little
don't
too
mind.
hot before then.
I don't mind 4 year bourbon, like
Yeah,
for a thing. If it's bottled in bond, like be 100 proof.
yeah,
But like if you're gonna do something where you're trying to get unique flavors and roundedness,
yeah. We're working on some cool finishes. It'll be fun. Yeah, you'll
yeah,
be excited when we launch it, I hope.
yeah, no, I'm excited. I mean, it's never never a dull moment in the whiskey industry. You never know who you're gonna meet. You never know what you're gonna talk about.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that you kind of went all in on American single malt. And
Yeah,
I
we
think that's
really
really cool.
have. And I think it's unique. I think it's fun. And like that's my passion. So like as a malt drinker, and that's like my go-to, it just felt really authentic to me and who I am. And
Yep,
then the idea between the rye and the bourbon was just more almost educational purposes.
for
Like
sure.
so people really understand the malt.
Yeah. No,
But
I think it's great. I think if you are in the end or in the kind of mood to spend a little bit of more money, right? We kind of can
yeah,
both agree on that. Then I would
yeah.
give this a try. Like I would, you have my full
No
recommendation.
prettier me.
If you're willing to spend $100, which for a lot of whiskeys, you can get a Macallan, can't even get a Macallan 15 for that.
No,
You can get a premium, I believe, whiskey. I think you could confuse a lot of people in both of these categories. And so, good job for you and your team. Don't
thank
always
you.
say that.
Appreciate it.
So I really am grateful that you sent us a bottle of each of these,
Absolutely.
and we're able to connect so quickly and get this together. And for the people, I'm looking at the website, it's the Macklowe.com, and that's Macklowe.com. You can go pick up these bottles, and if you spend $150 or more, you can use the code MACSHIP and get free
Love
shipping.
it.
So that's a beautiful thing. Look,
Yeah,
I'm advertising for you.
I love it.
Um,
Thank you.
and Julie, we just want to say thank you again for joining this episode of the Bourbon
Well,
Lens.
thank you for
Hope to have
having
you
me
back.
on. Have a great evening and, cheers.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.